Global trade activity rose in early 2025 Q1 to be precise as businesses rushed to import goods ahead of expected tariff hikes, pushing the WTO's Goods Trade Barometer to 103.5. Increased shipping and air freight activity along with recovery in electronics and automotive sectors that drove this surge. However, forward-looking indicators like new export orders fell below trend, signaling a potential slowdown. The World Trade Organization now forecasts only 0.1% trade growth in 2025, down from an earlier 2.7%, citing tariff risks and policy uncertainty. Further deterioration is likely if global trade tensions escalate or investment weakens amid rising geopolitical pressures. We have Dr. Femi Egbesola, President of the Association of Small Business Owners of Nigeria. It's a pleasure to have you in, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yes, a pleasure. Now, give us a picture of, to what extent you believe that African economies could be vulnerable to the projected global trade slowdown, especially in the second half of the year with the numbers we're already seeing from Q1.
Of course, Nigeria and in general Africa are import-dependent economy. So when there's any shake or spike in global trade, we are always affected. We are always open to having the shocks and experiencing it. And that's not too good for us as an economy, but that's the reality at the moment. At the moment, like you have just highlighted, there's a spike in front-loading order, which we can call a panic order, because everyone is afraid that prices may begin to shoot up because of the new tariffs or threatened tariffs from many of the countries, particularly the United States, China, and other global trade giants. And of course, what this means is that if nothing is done to arrest it, particularly in Africa and Nigeria, we'll begin to see the shocks in areas of inflation. We'll begin to see the shocks in the areas of forex. It will be difficult to now have more forex to buy a product, and it will also mean that Naira may become devalued. It will also mean that we may have disruption in the supply chain. And as a stakeholder in this industry, our advice is that government to begin to look at how they can build up infrastructure, how they can build up policies that can stimulate local production, that can stimulate us to be able to begin to do business within African countries instead of relying on global trade for everything we need to import. It also means that it is time for us to begin to look inward in Nigeria here, particularly in the manufacturing sector, how we can begin to do backward integration, look for local raw materials, look for alternatives instead of depending solely on import. So for me, while it is a risk in some way, in the other way, it is an opportunity for investors, for manufacturers to look at the game and begin to take the opportunities therein to improve their lots.
Mm-hmm. And as you have pointed out, it's an opportunity to rethink trade partnerships, and you have said Africa should look within. There's an acceleration with intra-Africa trade, and hopefully we see just that happen. But what specific policies would you say, we've seen the government, especially with the tax reform bill, I think that has been one that we have even spoken about on this show, but what other policy alignments does this administration need to come up with, whether from a legislative standpoint or the CBN regulator standpoint, to foster this growth with trade within production, within trade within Africa and within Nigeria itself?
All right. The first is to stimulate manufacturing sector. If you look at the last data we have in manufacturing, the GDP contribution of the manufacturing sector to the Nigerian economy went down from 15.6% to 8.2%, meaning that the manufacturing sector is really suffering a lot in Nigeria, and that's the real sector, that's the critical sector. So we'll expect governments now to begin to look at how they can build policies to support domestic manufacturing. One way that this can happen is to encourage more clusters in the country, more industrial clusters, whereby those who are interested in manufacturing startups can easily start their business without having to look for money to go and build their own factory, buy their own land, provide all the logistics for themselves. It's also important too for government to begin to look at how to open more access to funding, particularly for those who want to go into manufacturing, so that it will be easy for them to start and scale. It's also good to look at other infrastructures that are key to manufacturing, like electricity, like road, like the insecurity that we have at the moment. These are really issues in the manufacturing sector. Government needs to fix this. There must also be incentives for those who are now looking into alternative way of getting raw materials in the country, or backward integration, looking at how they can use our locally made products, locally made raw materials to make their own products in Nigeria. If there are incentives for that, it will encourage many to begin to look at this new opportunity rather than import. It's also good for government to begin to look at policies around supporting those who are more dependent in bringing in Nigerian products, increasing employment, as we have in the new tax bill. This is going to really engender growth in the manufacturing sector and will make us less dependent. It's also good to open up the agreement we have with AFTA, African Continental Free Trade Area. Yes, it's already on, but we're not doing too much in that space. We're not taking real advantage. It's now time for us to be doing more of regional trading with many other African countries, rather than looking for global trades. That may end up to threaten our economy with the new tariffs that will be coming up. Finally, it's also good for government to look at how they can help to reposition key stakeholders like business membership organizations, working with startups, working with small businesses, working with medium-sized businesses, so that they can use them as a bridge to be able to pass down their policies to ensure that they have their capacity built up to be able to do business the right way, in a way that we will become not just importers, but exporters. It has been said many times that most times here in Nigeria, we are exporting our products and importing poverty. That must stop. We must begin to embrace those such new policies like Nigeria First policy, whereby Nigerians and even government must prioritize buying from locally made products and services before looking outward.
Indeed. And, you know, from what you're saying, to build that industrial capacity, the need to scale is going to take a lot of capital, right? And this comes down to the credit system and credit system for SMEs especially. What more needs to be done? Because they are going to need money to scale. CBN has said, you know, and this administration, it's a $1 trillion economy they're building. SMEs have a huge role to play in that. But where is the money going to come from? What changes do you think need to happen with the credit system so that these businesses can see the capital to build that industrial capacity we need?
The first is that government must understand that there must be a policy targeted to those in the informal sector, which of many are the nanos. And this forms about 83% of the entire MSME ecosystem, meaning that out of the 40 million MSME we have in the country today, about 83% of them are in the informal sector. Most times, policy of government are targeted to the formal sector and leaves those in the informal sector excluded. So government needs to begin to work and understand the needs, the modalities and methodologies that can work for this particular sector. Next to it is to be able to build their capacity. Many of them, not necessarily is the fact that they can really not have a good business to access funding, but they do not have the capacity like financial literacy and all of that. Government needs to work more on building the capacity of those in the informal sector and semi-informal sector so that they can become positioned to be able to access funding. Again, too, a lot of bureaucracy needs to be broken down when it comes to access to finance, and also to issues of documentations and other things mitigating against accessing finance must be dealt with. One of it is, which I am happy that the government has worked on now, is a new credit guarantee scheme limited, whereby a chunk of loans now can now be guaranteed by the federal government through that credit guarantee scheme limited. We're also having coming up very soon the factoring system, whereby invoices and LPO can now be picked up by the banks and being funded without any collateral. These are some of the initiatives and creativity that we are looking forward to government to put on the table so as to be able to access this, particularly the informal and semi-informal. If we are able to open them to finance, if we're able to build their capacity, if we are able to make them investment friendly and expose them to various forms of investments, not just bank loans alone, you will see that the narrative will change and will become exporters rather than importers.
All right, hopefully we're rewriting our economic story and trajectory in Nigeria. But the macro indicators seem to be looking better. Inflation appears to be easing in Nigeria with 22.22% from June, from May's 22.97%. How do you see this impacting, trade and the sector, and especially WTO's projections for 2025? I mean, they're saying down from 2.7% to 0.1% in global trade. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, the revision of the expectation or projection of WTO from 2.7 to 1% or less than 1% is an indicator that the recent spike we have in trade is not sustainable. It's just out of fear, and the reality is now setting in. And when that happens, it will definitely trigger inflation. While Nigeria is trying to stabilize inflation in our economy, we should remember that Nigeria is not an island. We are also susceptible to whatever happens in global trade and global economies. So if we are not careful to quickly begin to tackle this issue of new tariffs when it comes to trade, we may end up having inflation going up again in Nigeria. It is important that hands must be on deck to ensure that while we have some form of reduction in trade in the global market, we stimulate other sectors in the economy to make up for that, so that we do not experience what we've been experiencing over the past recent years. That is increased inflation over the period of time. Government, and particularly CBN, needs to begin to look at indicators now to continue to push down inflation. We're also happy that there's some form of stability in Forex, even though we're having it being supported by a lot of funds internally. But it is also good to look at how we can continue to improve business, improve the economy, improve trade, which is largely dependent on inflation, largely dependent on Forex, and largely dependent on government policies. It's important too for MSMEs now to begin to look at how to take advantage of these many opportunities. I see them as opportunities, and it is going to make our product even cheaper in the global market. Now there's a lot of hike in different country tariffs. Our product is going to be more cheaper, and that will make it more competitive. And when it is more competitive, it means that we can do better in export. We can now export to global market and get more sales. We can now export even within Africa and get more sales and become better for it, instead of going to look for bank. Our development profile, our revenue, our turnover will increase, and will make our businesses better. That's our direction. But we cannot do all of this alone without government support.
Indeed, government support, but I mean, I'm glad to hear that we're rethinking our trade strategies amid tariff threats. And as you have pointed out, this rise in Q1 2025 numbers is panic buying. People stockpiling because of Trump's proposed reciprocal tariffs. And I'd like to get your thoughts on this, right? There are those who are now taking what he's saying, or thinking of taking what he's saying with a pinch of salt, because he has this on and off approach. Initially, the tariffs were to come in April 2nd. He gave it 90 days for negotiations. That expired July 9th, and then he pushed it forward to August 1st. Do you think, there should be that scuttle whenever Trump is, trying to announce or propose a tariff? Are they just threats, or do you actually see him seeing it through?
Businesses are very particular about policy statements, whether it is going to take effect or not, maybe after 90 days or even before. It has already become a policy statement, and investors work with policy statements. So for that reason, that's why we experienced that spike in front-loading orders, and that may also continue until the reality is set in. The reality is already setting in gradually. We are also looking at not just US alone now, but all other countries trying to reciprocate with newer tariffs. And these are higher tariffs. It's wise for any investor, any business person, to begin to stop when the prices are cheap, because it stands to lose nothing if the trade does not really come to life again. But you can imagine if it chooses not to stock, and if prices go up to the roof, it will reduce its working capital, because it will not be able to buy as many as it used to buy before. And that's why after stocking, the next thing now is that investors have pulled down investment. Businesses have stopped investment. People have stopped actually importing, looking at what they have already stocked. And that's exactly why WTO had to come up to revise their new projection rates downward because of this reality. So going forward, we are going to begin to see the new realities with the stability that will come after the 90 days that the US president has pronounced. Then we'll begin to look at the picture in the real face and begin to now determine strategically what new ways to deal with these new realities.
So, I mean, better safe than sorry from what you're saying. Also, taking a look at the data, right, there's a rise in shipping and air freight activity globally. How can Africa, and is Africa, our ports positioned to take this on, given the rise in shipping and air freight activity globally? Are African ports and logistic networks ready to tap into these gains?
Well, we're already tapping into it, really. Like you mentioned, it's correct that freight rates increased, shipping increased, and that is synonymous with when there are more imports. When you have more imports, the transportation and logistics will definitely go also on the rise. And Africa, and particularly Nigeria, is one of the major importers from some of these global countries. And for us to be able to meet up, it means that we must continue to improve on our ports, both the seaports and airports. And that, to me, is already happening. If you look at our port recently, a lot of innovation is taking place. Technology is also coming into play. They're also trying to now build up different dry seaports instead of depending solely on the major seaports or water ports that we have at the moment. We now have dry seaports here and there in a number of states that is already decentralizing that other ports. I think these are some of the innovations that we need to do. But when it comes to bureaucracy in the port, that's still there. It still takes more than necessary days for you to clear your products or your raw materials in the port. This is areas that governments should also begin to look at. But we're happy that they are taking some baby steps at the moment, and we hope that very soon, particularly with this new government, that will also be resolved, whereby when you have imports, whether there is a spike in order or not, your products, your raw material, your equipment will be cleared in record time, and it will improve ease of doing business and provide more money for importers and business alike, because that is what is the standard internationally.
And we know Dangote as well is dipping his hands in building a seaport as well. But thank you so much for your contributions, Dr. Femi Egbesola, President of the Association of Small Business Owners of Nigeria.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the advocacy you're doing, particularly in the business sector.